welcome to Real Truth for Today with Pastor Jeff Schreve, Senior Pastor of First Baptist Church in Texarkana, Texas. Now, here's Pastor Jeff.
Well, good morning and welcome to Real Truth for Today. Pastor Jeff Schreve here. Wanted to read to you from a very important passage of Scripture, 1 Kings chapter 3. It's when the Lord appeared to Solomon, young Solomon, who took over for David, his father, as king. He appeared to Solomon in a dream at night, and God said, "Ask what you wish me to give you." Then Solomon said, "You have shown great loving kindness to your servant David, my father, according as he walked before you in truth and righteousness and uprightness of heart toward you. And you have reserved for him this great loving kindness, that you have given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, yet I am but a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. Your servant is in the midst of your people, which you have chosen, a great people who are too many to be numbered or counted. So give your servant," this is his ask, "give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, to discern between good and evil, for who is able to judge this great people of yours?" And it was pleasing in the sight of the Lord that Solomon asked this thing. And so God gave him understanding, he gave him discernment, and as you know, he gave him great, great riches and peace in his lifetime and during his reign. Well, I want to talk today about discerning the times. I always think of my friend Rod Martin when I think about understanding geopolitical things, understanding what our government is doing and what other governments of the world are doing. So as you know, Rod is no stranger to our program. He's founder and CEO of Martin Capital. He's a philosopher capitalist. He's interviewed on a frequent basis by all sorts of people wanting to pick his brain on what is going on to discern the times. So Rod, welcome to the program.
It's great to be here.
Rod, would you say that discernment is probably not the greatest strength of the American people?
Well, we're having a little bit of a problem with that, no question about it. And, the biggest single reason I would suggest is that even Christians don't really read the Word faithfully. You just quoted a passage that I doubt many fellow believers could place on a timeline, could place in a context greater than the immediate surrounding verses of the words you read. And this is just a level of biblical illiteracy that didn't exist at the nation's founding. We were coming right out of the First Great Awakening. People were just suffused with Scripture. And though the Enlightenment was swirling around them, you didn't get the horrifying results of that you saw in France just shortly after in the French Revolution. You got this distinctively Christian settlement that gave us our modern Constitution, that gave us the legal system that we have that largely persists. We've certainly messed it up a little bit in the last century, but we have a tremendous heritage, and it's rooted in Scripture. There's a reason the left goes after the Bible and Shakespeare. They are the foundations of the English language as we know it today. And likewise, that common understanding that we used to have from Scripture used to inform an awful lot of American policy. And today, that is sadly lacking even in the church.
It really is. I go back to this scripture a lot, Rod, Hebrews 5:14, which is kind of piggybacks off the 1 Kings 3 passage. Solid food is for the mature, just exactly what you said, people that feast on the Bible, who because of practice have their senses trained to discern good and evil. And one of the things I've said repeatedly on the program, discerning between good and evil is not like discerning between high noon and midnight. Those can be very close together, and in Greek, good is kalos and evil is kakos. It's just one letter off, which I think is very telling, because unless we're listening to the Lord, unless we're seeking His face, we can easily get deceived thinking this is a good thing when it's really a bad thing.
No, that's absolutely right. And look, the world's complex. I don't know why we want to treat it with kind of a kindergarten understanding of all these things. It's very foolish. Anytime we have a new crisis, whether it's COVID or a war in Iran or, the price of beets in November, everyone on the internet is suddenly an expert in that. And I'm pretty sure none of them did that annoying thing they all say, do your own research. Right. Well, none of you did. This is obvious from your comments. And the grounding of that, of course, is in the Creator. The Creator actually made everything. So look, if I have a car and the maker of the car tells me every so many thousand miles you've got to change the oil, and I ignore what the creator of the car has to say, I can run it for a while. It'll keep driving until the engine burns up. And then, it'll be like, oh, I have been wronged. Everything is terrible. The world is against me. No, you idiot. You didn't listen to the creator of the car. And the same thing is true in all things with the creator of all that is.
Okay, Rod, when we... on the forefront of everyone's mind is what's going on in Iran as we're in day 11 of Operation Epic Fury, which is a really cool name, by the way. Roaring Lion is also a cool name, as Israel calls it. But if you listen to the people on the left who, they wouldn't say this, but it's obvious they're cheering for the other side. They're cheering for Iran. They're sad that the Ayatollah was killed right off the bat. But I posed the question to AI, if this were a football game, what would the score be? And they said, 56-7, 7 at best for Iran. They're trying just not to get shut out. They said you could say it's the dream team playing Angola from some years ago where the final score was like 116-48. But if you listen to CNN, you would think, man, this is nip and tuck. I don't know if we're going to be able to squeak out a victory here. Okay, what are people supposed to think with all that going on?
It's just a marvel. And again, who do you listen to? If you're Eve in the garden, do you listen to the God who created you and gave you all this bounty all around you? Or do you listen to the serpent and say, hath God said? And, he's just asking questions, you understand.
Right.
And
he's Tucker Carlson.
The intent, yes, and the intent is to mislead, of course, and he succeeded, and she fell with her husband, and here we are. Well, likewise, if you're listening to CNN at this point, you must be brain dead. I mean, I'll tune it in once in a while to see what the other side's saying, but it's the propaganda arm of the Democratic National Committee. And by the way, that's not an endorsement of Fox News. I like Fox, fine. I like Fox Business better, actually. I think they do a really great job, but I consume a staggering amount of information from a wide variety of sources, from extreme left to extreme right, Christian sources, Muslim sources, all these different kinds of things to get a picture of what's really happening and to judge it by the word. So in the Iran case, I don't even know how they would have 7 points on the board. If they've got a field goal, I haven't seen it. We have sunk basically their whole Navy. We have taken out the vast majority of their ballistic missile capability, which is a key part of this entire conflict for us. The Iranians are building, not we think they might go, nope, are building intercontinental ballistic missiles so that they can rain down the fire on New York and Chicago and Nashville and Miami that they have been on Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And we just can't let that happen. I'm sorry. I don't care if it's high explosive warheads. I don't care if it's nuclear warheads. I don't care if it's a dirty bomb. It doesn't matter. We can't have that go on from a regime that has spent 47 years chanting, even in its halls of parliament, death to America. We know what they're going to do with it. So anyway, Donald Trump has established air dominance over the country. They really can't even fly a plane without, I mean, it's absurd, the mismatch. But it's a big country. It's 90 million people. It has a lot of resources. It's going to take a minute to wrap this up.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Rod, as far as military capabilities and technology goes, is the U.S. far ahead of Israel, or are they neck and neck, or would Israel be considered even higher than U.S.?
Israel and the United States have different defense profiles. They're under immediate attack all the time from neighbors that are like 10 feet away. So, it is true that they'll modify, for instance, the F-35. The F-35I is an amazing plane, I for Israel, amazing plane. It has some capabilities that the standard F-35s A, B, and C do not have, but they're capabilities that the standard F-35s A, B, and C really don't need either, just because of the difference in mission profile that the U.S. military faces versus the Israeli Defense Forces. Now, having said that, Israel has had just a complete and total free market revolution over the last 20, 25 years. And you can thank Benjamin Netanyahu personally for that. A lot of these reforms were initiated when he wasn't even prime minister. He was finance minister, and then he became prime minister and saw it through. That was a socialist country. And like all socialist countries, it was really poor. And it really did depend on a lot of foreign aid. And, it's just kind of a perpetual basket case. They can fight really well, but their economy is really kind of in a shambles, even though it's an incredibly smart group of people. So, okay, that smart group of people, for comparison, is about 10 million people versus 340 million Americans. So there's a pretty good mismatch there. But the Israeli economy, after 20 to 25 years of free market capitalism, has become what Hong Kong used to be, has become what Singapore is. It is this little tiny state with virtually no resources that has become an economic dynamo, a $600 billion economy for just 10 million people. I mean, there's just almost nothing like it in the world. And it's all because of freedom. So their technological prowess is extraordinary. They finally have enough money to plow back into it. They're just gonna grow from here, not grow geographically, but grow economically, grow technologically, and grow as a major financial and tech center for the whole world. And yes, that affects their military. Now, where that plays back in with us is that what aid we still give them, which is a legacy of the Camp David Accords under Jimmy Carter, the aid we still give them, almost none of it actually goes to Israel. It goes to Boeing and General Dynamics and Lockheed Martin, and it's almost entirely utilized for joint development projects. So you just saw, the Israelis are, if you're listening to Tucker Carlson, he's probably somewhere talking right this minute about Jewish space lasers. Well, there actually are some now. The Iron Beam program is operational since December. They can actually shoot down missiles with laser beams. And that's a joint development project with the United States that'll eventually get rolled out as part of Trump's Golden Dome for North America.
Okay, Rod, that's Dr. Evil. That's what he had, the laser beams.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Freaking laser beams.
Unbelievable. Well, we're talking to Rod Martin, founder and CEO of Martin Capital, philosopher, capitalist, a non-communist, anti-communist. It's not a non-communist. You're an anti-communist. Is that right? Yes. And loves the Lord and has great insights on things. Well, lots going on, obviously, in our world. The war in Iran is on the forefront of people's minds. We're in day 11 of Operation Epic Fury. Everybody wants this to be over tomorrow. President Trump wants it to be over today, but we know that that's probably not realistic, so we continue to do what is right. You're listening to Real Truth for Today on American Family Radio. We're up against a break, but we'll be right back. Don't go away.
This is Real Truth for Today. Podcasts of the program are available on the podcast page at afr.net. Now, back to Pastor Jeff Schreve.
Welcome back to the program. Pastor Jeff here. We're talking to my friend Rod Martin, founder and CEO of Martin Capital, a philosopher capitalist and somebody that has great insights on what is going on in our nation, what is going on in the world. So we're calling this program Discerning the Times with Rod Martin. As we said, Rod, not very many people today in America are very discerning. The masses are definitely not discerning, and they want everything to be just microwavable. So if you're going to have this war, we want it to be over with before the end of the program. It's just so unrealistic. And so you have all these people, the liberals on the left, they're just, see, things are terrible, prices are up, oil prices are up. And it's like, well, good night. If you're going to have a gourmet meal, it's not ready in 5 minutes. Things take some time. But I want to talk to you about this because as it relates to, we were talking off air about the strike on Maduro in Venezuela. And Venezuela is a really different beast than Iran. And I would say most of that comes from the fact that you're dealing with a religious regime and an Islamic religious regime, which is a totally different beast because, as Hamas would say, we love death as much as you love life. So dealing with someone that's like that, that's a religious radical, that takes a different set of skills and I don't know, just a different program and strategy. What would you say to that?
Well, it is very different. In Venezuela, we have a grand jury in New York that indicted Nicolas Maduro and his wife, who is actually the brains of that gang. And now they're sitting in a jail cell, or a couple of them, in New York awaiting trial. That was an amazing operation. We were able to go in and capture them without losing a single American life. Believe me, this made an impression, not just in Venezuela, but in Iran and Russia and China and North Korea. And the biggest impression, of course, was on the other leaders of Venezuela, like Delcy Rodriguez, the new acting president, who all realized that we charged the Maduros with conspiracy. Guess who the conspirators are? So they can play ball with the United States, or they can be in a cell beside Maduro, and there's nothing they can do about it. So it makes a lot more sense to play ball and get rich and have a future, and eventually you're going to have to hand over to whoever's elected in a free and fair election. The last election, the opposition won by 70%, and the next one isn't going to be different. The difference will be that it will actually be an honest election and we'll actually get a correct vote count. Iran doesn't work that way. Iran isn't just led by Muslims. It's easy to talk about this in Muslim Christian terminology, but the truth is this is a unique group within a unique group. Most of the Muslim world we're familiar with is Sunni. There are exceptions all over the Middle East, but the vast majority are Sunni, and they have their own sects, and they have their own flavors, and that's all fine. Iran is the rare country that is actually run by Shiite Muslims, which is a completely different sect, which goes back 1,400 years, and these guys see the Sunnis as being worse in some ways than they see the Christians or the Jews being. You know how denominational rivalries can be in Christianity. Well, add jihad to it, and it's just a whole nother level. But wait, there's more, because the particular ruling sect in Iran is a group called Twelvers. Now, there are lots and lots of Christians who are anxiously awaiting the return of Jesus. And that's a good thing. The Twelvers believe, I'm not making this up, this is real. The Twelvers believe that their Messiah, the Mahdi, can only come back if they usher in his return by basically burning down the world. This is why you can't have them let them have a nuclear weapon. The North Koreans can be deterred because they don't want all of North Korea to be radioactive glass the next morning. Right. The Russians can be deterred. The Chinese can be deterred. It's always dangerous, but it's doable. And we've kept the peace since 1945. There has not been a nuclear war. So we've proven that works. That won't work with Iran. Iran, properly equipped, will do its best to burn down the world, and they don't mind committing suicide because they believe that 10 seconds later they're going to be in paradise with Allah and 72 virgins. Right. So, that's just a whole different kind of thing. And, it'd be like giving Jim Jones nuclear weapons. You just can't allow that. Right. And so this is a very, very scary situation, and you really have to decapitate the leadership if you're ever going to get to a point where the people can rise up and take their country back. I do want to say one thing that will please you to know. We actually have Iranian government statistics on how many Muslims there are in Iran. Mm-hmm. And I marvel at that. They publish these for their own reasons, but they published them nevertheless. 54% of Iranians have no religion. That's not the picture we all think of in the United States. 54% have become irreligious. Wait, there's more. Rapidly rising Zoroastrianism and Christianity, Zoroastrianism being the ancient religion of Persia, and of 75,000 mosques in Iran, 50,000 mosques have closed over the last several years. That's Iranian government data. So there is a huge opportunity here for the gospel. There's also a huge opportunity for an actual secular democratic regime that would be really, really hard to do in much of the Middle East, but actually is very much on track here. The Iranian people are incredibly pro-American. They have a pro-Israel bent going back to King Cyrus 2,500 years ago, and that has continued to be an active policy of Iran into modern times until the Islamic Revolution in 79. So when all is said and done, if we can actually flip this country, it's going to be, in 20 years, it's going to be a first world country, a free country, and a staunch U.S. and Israeli ally. And every single Middle Eastern armed conflict you can name is instigated, funded, and armed by the Iranian regime. All of that goes away. So am I saying peace is just going to break out everywhere? No. I mean, there's always something. But most of the conflict we currently have and have had that has tied up American troops in the Middle East for decades goes away. And we're able to bring those boys home or redeploy them to the Indo-Pacific to deal with China, whatever we need. And we're no longer bogged down in the Middle East. Instead, we have friends in the Middle East, and the whole world gets better.
Okay, with the Shia versus the Sunnis, Turkey is Sunni?
Turkey is Sunni. Basically, everybody's Sunni. The Syrians were ruled for many decades by an Alawite sect, but now they have a Sunni government again. Lebanon was actually 50-50 Christian Muslim for a long time, but in the aftermath of the Civil War, they've tipped majority Muslim, but that's mostly Sunni and that's true across the Middle East.
What was Saddam Hussein?
He was an apostate Sunni. And a lot of the leaders over there are. I mean, you have to understand, especially in the places that overthrew their monarchy, like Iraq and Egypt, usually the ruling class is more socialist than Muslim. And that's exactly the source of a lot of the conflict. The rise of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS, of the Wahhabists, and of course of Khomeini's revolution in Iran is all a reaction against the secularization of much of the Muslim world. And so, we're in the death throes of the worst metastasizing of that reaction. And I think that can go really well. Now, by the way, there are other Muslims in the world, and a really good example of that would be Indonesia, which is actually the world's most populous Muslim country, and yet they aren't Sunni or Shiite. They are Sufi, which is a whole nother thing. And as you see, they mostly sit out these conflicts in the Middle East. They're not actually interested in that. But from Pakistan to Morocco, you have a belt mostly Sunni, pretty unbroken with the exception of Iran. There is a Shiite majority in Iraq and in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia, which is important because that's the main oil producing region. But these guys are not in power for the most part. And where they are, Iraq primarily, they've mostly been reasonably friendly to the West. It has not been like the Twelver sect in Tehran.
Yeah. Okay, so lots of people are concerned, Rod, with the rise of Islam in America and the mosques that are popping up, Epic City that was proposed in Dallas. We have Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York City, the largest city in America. His wife was actually liking posts on social media that were celebrating October 7th, the massacre by Hamas in Israel. Dr. Phil commented on that and just said, hey, this is not just some rando. This is the wife of the mayor of the largest city in New York. And so that's a huge concern to many of us. How much of a concern is that to you?
It is a very complicated concern and one that should concern us on multiple levels. The first is if somebody wants to go build a mosque, this is America, it's a free country, you can do what you want. And if you want to bow 5 times a day toward Mecca, that's up to you. That's not really what we're facing here. I mean, the first thing is, and by the way, we just had a Republican primary in Texas, and the Republicans overwhelmingly voted in favor of a proposed ballot initiative to ban Sharia courts in Texas. You say, well, what's a Sharia court? Well, it's not a presbytery, that's for sure. They're trying to establish a separate parallel legal system based on Islamic law in parts of the United States, like Dearborn, Michigan, like Minneapolis, Minnesota, and even Dallas, Texas, of all crazy places, that enforces things that are anathema to the First Amendment and absolutely at opposition to the principles of the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. So if you're dealing with it on that level, you have a political issue. Are we going to let basically an Islamic confederacy rise up in the midst of the United States? Of course you can't do that. Eventually, that's a civil war. Additional, and it deprives Americans of their rights. If somebody is murdered in what is called an honor killing because the 14-year-old daughter looked at the wrong guy and her father kills her to restore the family's honor, that's obviously at odds with American law and American principles. And I don't care if you have a Sharia court, it doesn't justify it. And by the way, if a presbytery ever did that, that wouldn't justify it either. Right. So, we have established First Amendment law on this. There's a third complexity. The third complexity is that whereas Methodists and Baptists don't strap on suicide vests, Muslims do. And you can say, well, most Muslims don't. I agree with you. Most Muslims are, perfectly reasonable people you can get along with. But the people who really take their religion the most seriously have an alarming tendency to take seriously the parts of the Quran that require jihad or holy war against the infidel. And so they do actually strap on suicide vests and blow up school buses. They do actually bomb discos. They do actually bomb magazines that published a picture of Muhammad. And this is a real problem. So in some cases, those mosques have been shown to be paramilitary training centers and arsenals for things that you wouldn't want in this country. And so we've got a very complex situation because our First Amendment does protect religious expression, but that doesn't protect sedition or the violent overthrow of the government. And so, it's very tricky legal waters, but that doesn't change the nature of the threat.
Yeah, it is tricky, and it's you do have First Amendment rights, but you don't have the right to fundamentally change America. And, Rod, I'm one of those that says, I don't want to see Muslim politicians. I think that Zohran Mamdani, that's just a disaster. He's a Muslim socialist. I mean, those two things put together are just going to spell disaster for the people of New York City. And then knowing that his wife is, obviously an anti-Semite, if you're cheering and liking posts about the rape of and destruction of so many people on October 7th. So, yeah, that's a serious problem. And I was thinking this morning, Rod, it's a reminder again to all of us as believers, if we're not praying and we're not calling on the Lord to bring revival, America is gonna disintegrate. You can't have battle on so many zillions of fronts and all these people that are, like termites trying to eat away at the fabric and the foundation of the country. It will eventually crumble in that situation. So we can talk more about that when we come back from the break. You're listening to Real Truth for Today. Pastor Jeff Schreve here talking to my friend Rod Martin, founder and CEO of Martin Capital and philosopher capitalist. I'll get it out. And when we come back from the break, we'll be taking your calls at 888-589-8840. That's 888-589-8840. If you have a question or comment, we would love to hear from you. So give us a call and let's talk.
If you'd like to contact Pastor Jeff, email pastorjeff@fromhisheart.org. Now, back to Real Truth for Today with Pastor Jeff Schreve.
Welcome back to the program. Pastor Jeff Schreve here talking to my friend Rod Martin. Discerning the Times is the name of this program with Rod Martin. And we've been talking about the war in Iran. We've been talking about Islam. And we are going to open the phone lines in this segment, 888-589-8840. If you have a question or comment, love to hear from you. And before we go to the phone lines, Rod, I wanted to ask you about the SAVE Act. Now, I'm a very black and white, simplistic thinker. And to me, the SAVE Act is such a no-brainer. You have to, if an election is not secure and the integrity is not of highest priority, then what's the point? You have to make sure that we have a free and fair election, because if you're not closing loopholes for people to cheat, guess what? People will cheat. And the SAVE Act, in my opinion, closes those loopholes. What do you say about that?
Well, of course, you're right on every point except the idea that you are ever simplistic, because that is never, ever true. But nevertheless, on a certain level, you have the issue itself, which is, should we have free and fair elections? Well, that ought to be a no-brainer. And by the way, it is a no-brainer. 89% of Americans agree with this. And it doesn't matter what ethnicity they are. It doesn't matter what party they are. It's right around 89% for Democrats, Republicans, blacks, whites, Hispanics, men, women. You pick a group, and it's around 89% in favor of voter ID in our elections. And it should be, because every industrialized country on this planet, except the United States, requires voter ID. And it gets worse than that. You have to show an ID to get cough syrup. You have to show an ID to go to a bar and get a drink. You have to show an ID to go to the airport. If a cop pulls you over on the street, you've got to show an ID to not get arrested. It doesn't matter what you do in America, you've got to have a valid photo ID, and everybody does. And the lie that black people can't afford it is, first of all, absurd, and second, honestly racist.
Yes.
You hear the liberals talk about this as though black people are just these infantilized idiots who have no money and no concept of what they have to do to get around the world. I promise you, there are no black people in America who haven't bought cough syrup. They all get it. And it's just crazy. Right. So, okay, on that level, it is simple. Not simplistic, but simple. Here's where the complexity comes in. We don't have 60 votes in the Senate. You say, well, why does that matter? Well, because to vote an end to debate in the United States Senate, what we call cloture, to vote to end debate and proceed to a vote requires 60 votes to proceed. So yes, this is a procedural issue. Republicans only have 53 votes in the Senate. I'm pretty sure John Fetterman would vote with us on this, but we'd probably lose Susan Collins or somebody. So, you're way short of the mark. Well, the thing is, some Republicans, clearly not Donald Trump, but some Republicans, including Majority Leader John Thune, are terrified that if we take down that fence, we will unleash the herd. And what does that mean? Well, it means that all of a sudden you go from the Senate being a deliberative body where you have to get to some level of consensus to do anything to a simple majority body where absolutely anything can pass. And they're terrified that what will happen is when the Democrats are back in power in the Senate, because eventually they will be, that they're going to vote for all kinds of terrible things that in the past we've been able to block by preventing them from going forward without that 60 vote threshold. My point, and the president's too, is that they're going to do that anyway.
Right.
So there's a middle ground, and it's totally within the existing rule. That rule actually requires that senators stand up at the podium and talk. They actually have to filibuster like in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. They have to stand up there and keep speaking until they can speak no more. And then, they cede the podium to the next Democrat and he talks and talks and talks. By the way, the longest filibuster on record is from 1964 when the Southern Democrats filibustered the Civil Rights Act and did their utmost to prevent its passage. But the thing is, they actually had to stand up and speak for all those hours and days. And John Thune can require a talking filibuster. It doesn't change the rule. It doesn't change anything except it forces them eventually to allow a vote. And then we get a straight up, simple majority vote.
Yeah.
Again, the leaders of the Senate are terrified of what whirlwind that will unleash. I'm telling you, that whirlwind is getting unleashed. It's only a matter of whether we do it or they do.
Right. I totally agree. Good answer, Paul. Rod, thank you for that. Well, we want to go to the phone lines, and we have Paula on the line from Oklahoma. Paula, welcome to Real Truth for Today.
Hey, Pastor Jeff, and I'm going to try not to get excited as the other guy, but I totally agree with you both. And my dad was Air Force he joined long time ago. He did 24 years, and he was a gunner on AC-130 gunships. And we were stationed in Iran, and he took us with him. And it was in 1979. We were scheduled to stay 2 years. And we only ended up staying 6 months, and we had curfews then. We had to be in by 9 p.m. The Americans weren't allowed to go anywhere to begin with. We had a place called Gulf District that we stayed, and that was where all the military would go, and they had a commissary, but it really wasn't a commissary. But anyway, we got out right before they took the hostages, and my dad, they flew us out on a 130 into Greece, and people have really got to wake up in America. These people want to kill us, period. Mm-hmm. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. And they will if they get half a chance. And right. To have a few cents higher on your gas and food, for the safety that you'll have, it doesn't bother me one bit.
Right. That's a great point, Paula. Yeah, Rod, that's what we've been saying. If they have the opportunity, they would press the button and nuke whoever they could nuke, starting with Israel, starting with us.
As a religious obligation.
Right.
This 12er sect that runs the government of this great, big, wealthy country is just terrifying in its beliefs. It believes that it has to take proactive human action to bring about the apocalypse so that the Mahdi can return. There's nothing else like that in the world that actually has a serious military. We cannot allow this to continue. They're way too close to their aim.
Yeah, good point. All right, thank you, Paula. I appreciate that. We have Christy on the line from Texas. Christy, welcome to Real Truth for Today.
Well, good morning. Thank you for your show and dealing with such current issues.
Thank you.
My question for both of you is, whatever happened to the U.S. treason laws? The whole rise of Islam in our country seems treasonous to me when you look at anything that's opposed to the state and the Constitution of the U.S. And I was appalled when the Bush administration said, well, let's just let them all in, when they were the ones that carried out 9/11, and their stated claim is to kill Americans. So you can comment about that.
Yeah. Well, Rod, I still remember George Bush saying, Islam is a peaceful religion. It's like, it's not. Muhammad wasn't. Anybody that follows Muhammad, you're going to follow into the footsteps of jihad. So why is that not looked at as treasonous?
Well, first, I want to affirm what you just said. In the first century of Islam, so during and after Muhammad's life, they conquered basically the entire known world. I mean, they got almost to conquering France. They did conquer Spain, all of North Africa. I mean, all of these Christian areas, all the way into India, all up into Central Asia, far, far more territory than the Romans and the Persians combined had ever ruled. So pretending that this is a peaceful religion, no, there are peaceful Muslims, but the religion is not peaceful. And we have to treat it as an ideology as much as a religion. So that brings us to the treason question. In the United States, treason is defined incredibly narrowly in the Constitution because the king had defined it incredibly broadly before the Revolution. And so for the most part, there's very, very little you can point to that technically qualifies as treason. But there are a lot of things that are sedition, and there are a lot of things that are incitement to violence, and there are a lot of things that actually can be done in these cases. And we haven't taken that seriously enough. The bigger issue, of course, is the open borders policy progressively pursued kind of by default under Bush, then pretty explicitly under Obama while giving lip service to border security, and then just wide open under Biden. They let 10 million illegal aliens in the country in 4 years, and we don't know who these people are. I mean, we truly don't know. We know that a decent number of them seem to be spec ops from China. We know that a decent number of them seem to be jihadis from Iran. We know that a bunch of them are paramilitary gang members directed by the Venezuelan regime who have conducted paramilitary operations in the United States under the cover of gang membership. All of this happened on Biden's watch, and you have to get control of it. So the first and foremost thing is you have to seal the border, which Trump has now done. I mean, he was very effective in carrying out that promise, and you have to reverse the flow. So this last year, we had the first year in modern history of net outward migration rather than net inward migration. That's a big deal. We had 2.6 million illegal aliens leave the country, and 2 million of those self-deported. So as you do those things, you start getting some control of the situation back. And what is actually normal and domestic and protected by the rights of citizenship and the First Amendment is much easier to deal with than this invasion that the Democrats allowed.
For sure. Very good. Well, thank you, Christy. I appreciate that. It was a good question. We have Jim on the line from South Dakota. Jim, welcome to Real Truth for Today.
How you doing today, Jeff?
Doing well.
The name of your guest?
Yeah, Rod Martin.
The name of your guest there. And you got some very valid points. But one thing from my government class in high school is there's these little-known things called riders. So on the SAVE Act, and politicians are notorious for this, did anybody attach any riders to that SAVE Act that the senators are disagreeing with, and that's the reason they're not voting for it?
Yeah, good question. So pork belly additions, I don't think there are anything like that on this act, are there?
To the best of my knowledge, there aren't any yet, but you're exactly right to be concerned about it because, as you know, they will attach literally anything to literally anything that looks like it could pass. So far, I think we've dodged that bullet because they don't think this will pass, but I think it will. I think we're going to get there, and I think the pressure on Thune to actually force a talking filibuster is going to become overwhelming. Because the president understands we really can't have a free election if we don't do this. Now, one rider that is going to get attached, I'm pretty confident, is one that the president has called for. The Save America Act is about election integrity.
Right.
And that's a huge, huge popular issue. But the president in the last few weeks has been saying that he wants a rider attached to the Save America Act that prohibits transgender surgeries on minors and transgender participation in sports.
Yes.
So that's a really big deal for our girls. I mean, can you imagine being a girl and training for the Olympics all your life just to get punched out in the first few seconds of the first round by some guy pretending to be a girl? I mean, it's just horrifying. It destroys women's sports. But at a bigger level, if you're talking about transgender surgeries on minors, it destroys lives. You can't undo it. If you castrate a child, he's not ever going to be what God made him to be. And it's just horrifying. So I think the president is going to see to that, and I'm really proud of him for wanting to.
Amen to that. Well, Rod, thank you so much for being my guest. You can check on Rod. Go to rodmartin.org, rodmartin.org. He has great stuff on his website. Follow him on X, I do, and I read his stuff regularly. Rod, it's always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for listening to Real Truth for Today. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the calls, but listen, go out today, shine for Christ, and share what great things the Lord has done for you. And remember, our main job, our number one job for being on this earth, obviously to love the Lord and love people, but to be His faithful witness, to warn people of the wrath that is to come, and tell them about Jesus, who is mighty to save. So let's do it today. God bless you.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.